Hello, the UN Secretary General is urging the Israeli government to stop its decision to speed up the construction of illegal settlements in the occupied West Bank. A spokesman for Antonio Guterres said in a statement, the Secretary General is alarmed by the anticipated advancement next week of over 4,000 settlement units. He reiterated that settlements are a flagrant violation of international law. He urged the Israeli government to halt and reverse these decisions and to immediately and completely cease all settlement activities in the occupied Palestinian territory. Khalid al-Gindi is a senior fellow at the Middle East Institute, and he says Israel's decisions on the illegal settlements undermines the hopes for a two-state solution.
The actions of this Israeli government, they've accelerated virtually every negative trend that you can imagine, from the violence on the ground to settlement expansion to evictions to building and expanding settlements in the so-called doomsday settlements like E1 outside of Jerusalem. So this is really, an attempt to slow down this very accelerated pace at which this extremist government is working to destroy chances for whatever may be left of a two-state solution. I think unless the very strong words are combined with some sort of action by key players like the United States or the European Union, some sort of consequence to these actions, then they're simply going to be ignored as they always have been. So there really needs to be action on the ground to back up these strong words, and we just haven't seen that at all.
We have two correspondents joining us in a moment. We'll cross over to Nida Ibrahim in the occupied West Bank to give us an update on the situation there. But let's bring in Imran Khan, who's joining us first from West Jerusalem. Imran, to tell us whether there's been any reaction from officials where you are to the comments that have been made by Antonio Guterres.
Well, there's been no official comment on those particular comments from Antonio Guterres. In fact, the only comments about the Jenin raid came last night on Monday evening when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu visited some of the Israeli soldiers who were injured in that raid. And he just reiterated what we've heard him say before, that they're still committed to fighting terrorists, as he calls them, anywhere that they might be in the occupied West Bank. However, what I'm seeing, what we're reading in local media, is that the army in particular is conducting quite a serious post-mortem of the operation about what happened, particularly into the use of these improvised explosive devices that managed to disable a military vehicle, and that's what led to those helicopter gunships firing missiles into the Jenin refugee camp, and that's the first time we've seen anything like that in 20 years. There may well be reaction to this new settlement building that Antonio Guterres was talking about. Some 4,000 new units may well be approved very soon, but right now there's no particular reaction to that, and it's likely that we aren't going to hear any reaction, official reaction at least, to the Jenin refugee camp raid.
Yeah, OK, Imran, we'll cross over to Nida in a moment and find out exactly what happened during that raid and the resistance that was put up by the Palestinians. But while I have you with us, let me just keep with what we've been hearing from the UN. These statements by the UN, Imran, do they actually change the reality on the ground? I mean, the Israeli government, judging by past history, will still go ahead with its plans.
That's absolutely right. If any UN decision has been made that goes against Israel, it almost immediately comes under criticism from the Israeli government, particularly right now with this far-right Israeli government that has an agenda to try and push forward settlement building. And remember, the law around settlement building actually changed a couple of days ago in the occupied West Bank. There used to be this 6-phase process where politicians could actually raise objections. That's been got rid of, and now there's one man, Bezalel Smotrich, who has almost total control over approving brand new settlements in the occupied West Bank. They've streamlined the process. That's the word the Israelis are actually using. But this is alarming to both the international community, and it's things like that that have got Antonio Guterres worried, and that's why he made those comments. But Will they be listened to by the Israeli government? Well, they haven't in the past, so it's unlikely they'll do so now.
Okay, thank you so much. Imran Khan reporting for us from West Jerusalem. Let's now bring in Nida Ibrahim reporting from Ramallah in the occupied West Bank. So Nida, Imran was just saying that what they're reading in the media over there is that there's going to be a post-mortem that's going to be conducted as to what exactly happened in Jenin, because Israel did launch that assault, but they were in for a big surprise by the resistance that was put up by Palestinian fighters.
Indeed, there is a different reaction in Jenin. It is of pride. Palestinians say that the resistance there, although it has very primitive weapons, it has very, or really no training whatsoever, so they were able to kind of incur damage when it comes to the Israeli forces that have been raiding Jenin for the past year and even more than that. Basically, Israel says that it wants to crack down on the resistance and the fighting groups that have been really growing in Jenin, in Nablus. We're seeing them also growing in other Palestinian cities like Jericho. So for them, it's important to keep raiding, and people that are afraid that Israel is going to be going towards a full-on military operation to crack down on the Palestinians there. But as far as they're concerned, they say that they're sad that they've lost many Palestinians during these raids, but at least they were telling us that they were resisting the Israeli occupation. A sixth Palestinian has succumbed to his wounds this morning after he was shot during the raid. It raises the number of those who were killed to 6. Remember, this is a very close-knit refugee camp, very heavily dense. The father, according to journalists who were there, the man who was killed, is a father of another Palestinian who succumbed to his wounds earlier this year in another Israeli raid. Journalists were telling us that he was surrounded, he couldn't get the medical care needed, so he succumbed to his wounds. We were there in Jenin and we prepared this report for you. Have a look.
This is the moment that turned an Israeli arrest raid into a 10-hour gunfight. Palestinian homemade explosives damaging armored vehicles in the Jenin refugee camp and injuring 8 Israeli soldiers. It took Israeli forces nearly 1 hour to move the soldiers to hospitals and hours more to pull out at least 5 vehicles. Mohammed Bramke says the camp felt like a battlefield.
The army was in the houses of my neighbor and my father. An Israeli military jeep was near my car here. You can see the damage. They were lined up in the street. It was very scary.
It's become common for Israeli raids to leave behind Palestinian casualties, but it's rare for Israeli forces.
This is the first time in nearly 20 years that we see Israeli helicopters strike Palestinian targets here in the occupied West Bank. People here say that scenes today resemble the battle that took place in the refugee camp in 2002.
Shortly after the Israeli forces withdrew, Palestinians buried their dead. Among the 5 Palestinians killed is 15-year-old Ahmed Saqr.
Anytime I asked him for something, he always said yes. He was decent, polite, respectful. But his problem was that the moment the Israeli army raided, he ran towards them. He wanted to die after his friend Omar was killed. The death of his friend was very painful for him.
Amal Abu Sarriya's 31-year-old son was shot while fighting against Israeli forces.
They're the ones attacking us. If they didn't come over, none of this would have happened.
Snipers are targeting us. Journalist Laith Ja'ar shot this video from one of the rooftops near the camp. Cameraman Hazem Nasser was shot in the side while wearing his press gear.
They shot me 4 to 5 times, and even as I was rushing to the ambulance, they kept shooting at me.
Israeli forces have been raiding Jenin and Nablus for more than a year now. They say it's to crack down on fighting groups. But many Palestinians say they're proud that their limited weapons can put up such resistance against one of the most advanced armies in the world. Nida Ibrahim, Al Jazeera, Jenin, the occupied West Bank.